So my name is Matthew Mize, and I'm a social studies teacher, and I teach in junior high or middle school. And I've been teaching at this one for 6 years, but total I've been teaching 10 years full time. So yeah, and before that, I did spend a year overseas teaching English as a second language, and so that's about all my teaching history. I usually arrive at like 7:30 and I spend my first, half hour getting materials together. On most years that involves like making copies and things like that. But this year it's not that. Getting my Zoom ready and camera and turning on my Zoom light here. Um, Stuff like that. And then I teach two sections in most years of world history and two sections of US history to seventh and eighth grade. And I also teach technology because at private schools, they tend to not have as large of a staff. And so we all have to teach at least one thing that's kind of out of our main area. Um, and then we get a free period at some time during the day to do some preparation and planning. Um, Mine's at the end of the day, so I use that to prepare for the next day more. And then after school, I supervise students while they wait for their rides to pick them up. And and then at night, I get to go home and help my kids with their homework. And once they're to bed, I spend the rest of the night until I pass out for sleep, grading papers and doing more lesson planning. So, unfortunately, even though you could learn everything you need to know to teach on your own, they still require formal schooling, and so that means you have to have a bachelor's degree, and then you need to do a teacher credential program, which usually adds a year onto your normal 4-year degree, and then of course you can get a master's or more if you want to get paid more. And so, luckily at my school, they offered a master's in teaching, which is like your credentials with a master's built in. And so you get to jump straight to that higher tier of pay. I have a bachelor's degree in history. And then of course I did my master's in teaching after that. And so that's about 5 years of school if you don't start teaching before you finish your master's. I started teaching right right after I got out of my first semester of my master's, and then I got a full-time job. And so after that, I was taking classes while I was teaching, one class every quarter for the next couple of years, and so that stretched it out for a while. But getting the master's, I would say, is worth it for the extra pay. But the problem is you end up paying, you know, more than you would for a normal degree, and then possibly getting paid less than you would for some other degrees. But one good thing is the government has a loan forgiveness program that you can get access to after you've made payments on your student loans for a certain number of years. A kind of a boring story because I went to college and didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I took an aptitude test while I was taking my generals, and it said like categories of jobs that might work for you. And, I had things on mine that were like, um, a manager or a, a teacher. And I thought, oh, I'll be a principal. And so I just decided I jumped into that because that's what it said. And I didn't really have any other ideas. But and then as I was going through, I realized you can't really be a principal unless you've been a teacher first, or else no one's going to hire you. and no one would respect you anyway as a principal. Your teachers wouldn't. And so I was like, well, what could I teach? And history was my easiest subject in high school. It came to me more naturally. And I did have a teacher who inspired me, sort of. He was like kind of this cold, aloof guy who was my history teacher, and he never talked to anyone. Everyone knew that he didn't like underclassmen, and he told people that. And so but I remember my sophomore year, I was sitting in the hallway and he was walking by and he saw me and he stopped and he was like, "You're in my class, aren't you? My history class." I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, you're pretty good at you do a pretty good job in there." And then he walked away and I was like, "Whoa, I can be good at something in school." And so I realized, oh, I actually kind of like history. And so that's how I picked, that subject. And then once I got actually teaching, I decided, I knew a little bit more about how awful of a job being principal would be, and how much pressure they're under all the time. And I thought, I'm good. I'll just stay where I am. I do like teaching history because, to me, it is just it's a big story and it's all connected, and I like being able to go through history and explain to the students this happened because they were reacting to this. And then, this, I know some teachers teach it backwards. They start it now and then they work their way back, which I've never done, but it sounds really interesting. But I like the story aspects. I have students sometimes that ask me like, "Mr. Mize, what kind of ship is that in the picture?" And I'm like, "I don't know. That's not what I find interesting from the past. I don't look at the type of gun that was used in this war or anything. I'm more interested in the politics and the motivations of people." Um, so yeah, I like that, and then I like making the connection to today and how things like that at that time set a precedent that we still follow today, and different things like that, so that students understand the world that we live in now. So you can imagine I'm pretty interested in politics and things like that today because of my interest in history in the past. But yeah, and I also like teaching them um, the skills that historians use, checking sources and things like that, which are really useful in their lives when they're reading social media and things like that, and um, helping them not to fall victim to all sorts of disinformation and things like that. I would say that the majority of my day I spend with my students, but we do have, the other teachers. We have a teacher's lounge. We talk to each other uh, during our free period. Sometimes we'll just go in and just try to decompress, talking to adults every once in a while, and then we work with them on um, many teachers work with other teachers on their lesson planning because they're part of a department of teachers that teach the same subject. In a small school like mine, I am my department. And so I, do my own lesson plans for my subject, but we still work together to identify students that are having trouble, and we check with each other to see, does this person struggle um, with this kind of thing in your class too, so that we know, you know, to contact parents and get the students the help they need. Um, and then of course we've got meetings where we get to discuss school events and all sorts of upcoming um, things that we have to work on. But yeah, so we see other people than just the students. Yeah, I actually in college I was a server at a restaurant for 3 years, and that definitely helped me to be learn to be patient and it helped me to build a thick skin because people in the service industry really take a lot of verbal abuse. And if you remember being a student, um, they tend to sometimes say things about teachers. They have feelings about teachers sometimes, and so it's good to have a nice thick skin. And I also worked at summer camp, and so that gave me a lot of experience with young people as well, and understanding how to deal with them. So yeah, a good teacher needs to be patient. They need to be disciplined because the workload is always present. You need to be organized because you will frustrate yourself and your students if you aren't. Friendly, responsible. Um, you need to be willing to be firm because students will walk all over you if you aren't. As a teacher, you always feel guilty. You always feel like you could and should be doing more, and you do the best you can. So it also helps to be forgiving of yourself. Computer and a projector. Uh, yeah, there's no like tools of the trade that you need to go out and get before you can be a teacher. Usually that's provided by the school. So no, this is I've got this it's like a standing chair sort of spins, so I can just pick up my feet and spin around, lean on it, and just like it's pretty crazy. Sometimes I fall off of it. I probably get to travel more than a lot of other types of teachers because every year we do an eighth grade trip to Washington, D.C. And we go to Philadelphia and Gettysburg and Williamsburg while we're over there. So I do that trip every year. Other than that, not a lot of travel. I've never worked in the public education system, but have I've been told about it by other people that I work with that have been there, and they've said that oh, it's the students behave better in a private school, and I'm sure that's just a general rule, not necessarily in every case. I definitely know I've had my fair share of students who didn't behave well, so but I think that parents have to pay tuition, and they probably put a lot of fear in their students that they better not get kicked out because I spent a lot of money for you to be here. So I think it makes sense that students might be a little bit better behaved in a private school. But as far as from the teacher's perspective, we definitely get paid less. I don't know about non I work at a Christian school, and we are a private school not because we are elite or exclusive or anything like that. We're just private because the parents have that certain perspective they want the students to get their education from, and so our goal is to try and make sure that um, the students as many students can afford to go to school here as possible, and so therefore we don't try to get rich off of it. And so public school teachers get paid better, and they get paid based on the political climate. And so when the government gets a lot of pressure, the teachers get paid more. And we don't really have that kind of pull. Also in private schools, we don't have as many um, like rules and regulations for how we teach and what we teach. And so we have a curriculum that we are trying to teach to, but the teachers have a lot more freedom in how we try to reach that goal. And we don't have as many like state, we don't have like these state mandated tests that the students have to take on a regular basis to make sure that they're achieving it. And so we can kind of, we have our own goal and we know how we want to get there. And so we can tailor the curriculum to meet our personalities as teachers and what we think works best for us. And that's not as much freedom. I mean, that's more freedom than I think a lot of public school teachers feel like they have. So yeah, so I work at a private Christian school. So I don't know how social studies teachers are paid at other private schools, but we get paid much less than public school teachers, because the families don't pay for Christian education to make teachers rich. They just want to pay only as much as is absolutely necessary so that their students can get the education from the Christian perspective that they want. And that, to be fair, is what we want as well. And so we don't try to be exclusive or elitist or anything. So we allow, pretty much anyone to go to our schools, and we provide financial aid for people so that they can. So in the end, what that means is we don't really take a lot of money home. We get enough to make it affordable um, to live. We get really good health benefits. Um, so that makes up for it. But so yeah, we're not impoverished, but we don't get paid as much as public school teachers do. Hardest thing that I can think of that would kind of fall into a category of a stigma is, in junior high, students, I hear this from parents all the time, their students are always lying to them. And so they're constantly telling me, my student said that they did this assignment, why isn't it graded? And then I have to bear the bad news to them that, well, actually your student is saying that because they don't want to do the assignment because they'd rather play their video games, and so they haven't actually turned it in. That's why I haven't graded it. And parents understand that because they see this pattern, but oftentimes what they don't get is that their students lie about other things too. And so sometimes they will paint their teacher out as someone who is like petty and doesn't like them, and they do that to get out of trouble when they have gotten in trouble at school. And so they will assume, parents will sometimes assume things about teachers, like we have nothing better to do than pick on their kids and like mess with their grades and things like that, when reality is their child misbehaves in class, and sometimes they're irresponsible and they don't do their work, and then they make up lies to get out of trouble. And so it is frustrating sometimes when parents will side with their student, even though they know very well that their students, lie to them all the time about other things. They won't give us the benefit of the doubt when it comes to us sometimes. Yes. So, I mean, I know that when I went to school, for education, most of the people most of the other students that were taking these education classes were either aiming to teach high school or they were aiming to teach elementary school. And I never met a student who wanted to teach middle school. um, we were always saying, thank goodness there are people like you that will teach elementary, because I couldn't do it. And they said the same thing back to us, but we all said, I don't know how anyone teaches middle school. And I started out as a high school teacher, and I enjoyed it that they were able to, understand complex thoughts, and we were able to have, deep discussions and things like that. And then when I moved here, the only job that was available was middle school. And so I took it. but I've actually been pleasantly surprised because middle schoolers, even though they are less mature and sometimes can be, more disruptive, they are actually quite sweet. They still have the desire for their teachers to like them, and so they will, still, they're somewhere in between, being children and being too cool for their teachers. And so it's just really funny that, sometimes I'll open the door and they'll all bound in and surround me and want to tell me about, whatever anime show that they're interested in or something. And it can get overwhelming sometimes, but it's out of love. Um, but yeah, so I think it makes up for how crazy they can be sometimes. And then, well, and the benefits, the real benefits are, um, at my school, it's a K to 12 school, and so I can see these kids on on the playground, and I can think, oh, I wonder what they're going to be like when I'm teaching them, and then I teach them, and then they go on to high school, and I get to see them for the next 4 years, um, you know, becoming more, um, self-assured and turning into, little adults. And then after they graduate, I get to follow them on social media and see what they do with their lives. And so that's the really cool thing. Back to me, and sometimes they come back and talk to me, um, from high school, and they want to, I guess whenever they want to feel grounded in this new, phase of school, they'll come back and talk to us middle school teachers and ask for advice and things, and that's great. My least favorite is when students are, misbehaving. Sometimes you'll get a class that has like a ringleader, and they have just decided, for whatever reason, whatever experiences in their past that led them to believe that you know, they identify as troublemakers and they're proud of it. And they'll bring the rest of the class down with them, and it's really hard to deal with classes like that. Um, but usually in the end, you'll have, some interaction that finally makes it clear to them that, like, you're here for them, and no matter, how they act, um, you know they are loved and appreciated, and eventually they come around and they come back and, oh, Mr. Mize, you remember that one time that I was playing with the balloon in class and you popped it? Oh, that was so funny. and and we get to laugh about how much grief they gave me when I was their teacher. So it works out in the end. That happened. That someone they had a balloon for their birthday, and it was wrapped around the leg of their desk, and I didn't realize it, but they were like doing this and messing with this balloon over, and it would not stop while I was trying to teach class, and it was distracting. And so finally I just walked over, and I was going to calmly, it was tied to their backpack, I was going to calmly just pick up their backpack, move it over to the wall where they couldn't reach this balloon, and keep going with class. And as I'm pulling it, it's trying to go under the desk and unwrap, and it just pops. And so it looked like I was just mad and just and like pop their balloon. And I acted like nothing happened and just kept teaching. And they were all just like, oh man, he's mad. and and I didn't I never said anything about it again. And then when they were in high school, they came back and asked me about it, and we all had a good laugh. Oh yeah, what I wish there had been a class in my university that actually was about how to teach history, or how to teach, social studies, because all of the classes, um, when I was in education were very general. This is how you make a lesson plan. And there's history and English and PE and art, all these different, very different subjects, teachers or hopefuls in the same class learning the same thing. And then when you actually get into the classroom, you're like, oh no, I can't teach history like they teach PE. There's a big difference there. And so I wish that they had, divided us up and actually given us classes on how to teach our subject. It's not one size fits all. And so when I got into the classroom, I actually had to teach myself how to do a lesson plan that works for me. And, and the other thing is, for history, it's growing every day. The subject gets larger and larger, and we have to constantly evaluate which things are we okay just not teaching students about, and eventually they're going to be like 9/11. I mean, do they really need to know that? And they're just going to have to throw it out and skip it because something more important happened, 10 years, 20 years later or whatever. And so I wish I had known that it's okay, and how to deal with that reality, because they give you a big textbook and they're like, this goes from, pre-Columbus all the way to today. You need to cover all of it. And I mean, that's what I assumed. And of course, when I actually taught for a couple of years, I realized that's impossible. And I had to, get okay with the fact that I just needed to decide which parts I'm going to, feel like are important enough to teach. Oh yeah, one thing that they used to tell us in our education classes was the whole theory of the multiple intelligences, and that you need to make sure that you incorporate into every lesson plan these multiple intelligence, these different ways of learning, right? That the physical or kinesthetic. Anyway, you had to like give them something to touch. You had to give them a visual. You had to give them audio, and all these different things in every lesson plan. And when I was teaching, I was like, you get done with one lesson, you're like, oh, I'm so proud of that. Oh no, I have to do this again tomorrow. And so like you were constantly having to lesson plan. And I realized like, there's no way I'm going to be able to incorporate all of those things into every lesson plan every day, all year. And then then I realized that I'm not doing that. And so I didn't do it. And then it was, a couple years into my teaching that I saw a TED Talk where a guy was saying like that whole theory of of the multiple intelligences is just it's baloney. He said that the way that you teach a subject should have much less to do with how the students learn best, because they were saying the theory is that each student learns better a certain way. And so you have to make sure that you're teaching to each of those students. So some students learn best visually, some learn best, touching. And they were like, no, like, first of all, we all need to learn to be able to learn multiple ways. You shouldn't just be like, well, I'm an auditory person, so you're going to have to, explain to me how to make the cake, but I'm not going to touch it. Like they said, really, it's the type of thing you're teaching that should determine what method you use. So like, you don't read a book about how to change the oil on a car. And in auto mechanics class, you touch the car and you do it by hand. That's how you teach for that class. And so I realized, oh, that makes most sense. So basically, when I'm teaching history, whatever way seems to me that would get the point across the best, that's the way I should use. I shouldn't just make up a lesson that does all of these things, even though half of them are dumb and won't really get the point across fully. So like I know some teachers who um, focus on that a lot, and so they're like, oh yeah, we're going to do the war of 1812, we're going to do this battle, the battle of New Orleans, and so we're all going to turn our desks over and we're going to all throw wads of paper at each other, and that'll simulate the battle. And I'm like, the students don't need to do that to know what a battle is. Like, that's just a waste of time and paper. And so yeah, so it's all coming from silly theories that really your instincts can tell you are wrong. Most teachers of education programs have barely taught in a classroom outside of college. So they mostly don't know what they're talking about. They mostly just teach you theory and philosophy. And then when you actually become a teacher, you're like, oh, they didn't know what they meant. They didn't know what they were saying. Um, and I've checked. No, I'm just kidding. But I know for some of them, they haven't actually. They did the teaching, program themselves. They went and they taught for a year, and then they went and taught other people to become teachers, and so basically, when you become a teacher, if it doesn't feel like it matches exactly to what you were told in classes, don't feel too bad, um, because that's probably why. It's harder in my kind of school, in a private Christian school, because they're they pretty much they give you a salary, and then they're like, you're going to do whatever we tell you to do, and we'll pay you each month. And so we don't have um, any limit to what our responsibilities are, really. It's like, these are the classes you teach, but you also need to be a class sponsor, and you're going to have to run and be involved in fundraisers, and you're going to also have to do yearbook, and you're going to have to supervise students at these times and these places. There's trips you're going on and all of that stuff. um, and then you have more classes usually, because it's a smaller school. Like I said, you've got less teachers doing the teaching, so more classes to prepare for, and lesson plan for, and grade papers for. So my nights and weekends are often going to be at least partly dedicated to more work. And then of course I have my kids. And so yeah, as a teacher, and I know this is also true for public schools, because there's never you can never do enough as a teacher. You always feel like you could have done more, and so you always feel a little guilty. You either I feel guilty for not doing enough as a teacher, and when I do more for my students, then I feel guilty for not doing enough for my kids at home. So that's just something you have to get used to as a teacher. Some people, yeah, I'm sure, like a lot of careers, some people will know they want to be a teacher from a young age because some teacher inspired them and they want to have that effect on other people. Um, but beyond that, luckily, part of the program, if you think you might want to be a teacher, once you start the program, almost every class that you take requires you to actually go and observe a teacher in the classroom. And so you get to see what it's like. And then some classes even require you to, teach a few lessons for that teacher. And so you get plenty of chances to turn back and do something else if you really don't think it's for you. And then, in addition to that, you can just remember what it was like in the classroom when you were a student, and you can get a pretty good idea of what you're in for as a teacher. I'm getting what I deserve. I know that. And then of course, and I don't know if this is something you can do, but you could try getting in touch with the school and asking them before you get in the program if you can shadow a teacher for a day or something. I know there's restrictions, but you know, they might make you do a background check or whatever, but it's worth asking. If you're like into medical but also teaching, you could be like a speech pathologist. There are counselors so that you can, you know, work with students but not in front of groups of students as much. You could be an administrator, principal, registrar. You could just be a curriculum developer where you come up with lesson plans and resources that teachers can use for lesson plans. Some schools actually hire curriculum advisors who just spend all day helping teachers in that school to improve their lesson plans. And then there's social workers where you can just look out for the students and make sure that they've got what they need back at home to be able to succeed in school. And then there's, you know, you could be a teacher's aide, and you wouldn't need any college for that, I don't think. Oh, also you could get into the textbook industry. I had a friend in school whose mom used to be a teacher, and then she quit teaching and she started writing textbooks. And I think she'd had enough of our nonsense. And so she went and just started writing. So that's possible. Teaching is monotonous, but not boring. It's exhausting, but inspiring. It's thankless, but fulfilling. And it's a tough job, but someone has to do it. So just decide if that's you.